Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our next phase of the ball bounce exercise. Typically what you might see at this point is adding the squash and stretch to the stationary ball. So you'll see it looking, let me go ahead and shorten this down here. So you would add the squash and stretch at this phase, and then you would translate it forward so it looks like it's bouncing forward. But what happens is we're not getting a rotation in if we do this, and this ball has some limitations on it in terms of how it can squash and stretch. So it can only squash and stretch at the top and bottom here. So if we have rotations happening that are, say, off like this, and the ball is coming down in this position, we can see that that's going to create a problem, right? I'll go ahead and undo that. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete the squash and stretch that I did on here in the stationary, and we're going to add this last. So we're going to build our forward motion and then our rotations, and we're going to be precise with our rotations in adding them so that they hit at the top or bottom when the ball is striking the ground. Let's go ahead and back our scene up here to frame 1. We're going to grab our main controller. This is the one that we're going to add our forward motion to. I'm going to just back this out and slide it over here. We're going to be translating it forward on the z-axis, which is this direction. Currently, right now, we've got a keyframe here that we set with our first initial keyframe. We'll go ahead and leave that. And we want to see it slide forward. Down here, 120 is where it has its last bounce. But we're going to go ahead and open up this timeline to frame 200. So this is where it's going to come to a complete stop. We are going to have it roll to a stop, so it's going to be bouncing and then rolling, and it will continue to roll after the bounces. So this will give us plenty of time to bring it to a complete stop. So I'm going to hit W on the keyboard. That brings up my move manipulator. I'm going to grab the blue arrow right here, which is the z-axis, and I'm going to slide it forward. I'm going to go ahead and back this out so we can see that it's gone all the way out here off the grid, which is fine. And let's go ahead and translate it just a little bit more, maybe right around -35. It's already created a keyframe for us, so we can see it's kind of compressed right here. Let's go ahead and hit F in our graph editor, and that will frame up on our 2 keyframes here for the Z translate. So let's go ahead and play this now. Okay, so if we look at our ball bounces, they're sort of happening at the beginning a little too compressed. We want to see them moving forward at a quicker rate and then slowing down more at the end here. So this is coming to an abrupt stop. So we can see that our ease out isn't really quite happening the way we want it over here. I've selected this last keyframe. I'm just going to flatten it. So I'm going to click up here in the graph editor, and that will flatten out that tangent. So now we should see it come to a nice slow ease out. Great. So up here, let's see how it's translating at the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and stop this, bringing it back here, and I'm looking at how it's falling. So right now, it's just at over 6 units. We probably want to see it move a little bit further. Let's select the keyframe here. I'm going to go ahead and just flatten it initially, and we can see that that has a really big effect on it. It basically just drops down in the same location, which is not what we want. Let's break our tangents and go ahead and select this tangent out here. And let's begin bringing it down here until we see it out here a little bit further. So we're right around -7 units here when it hits the first time. Okay, and then you see it jumping forward maybe just a little bit too much. So I'm going to back off on the length of my tangent. We can see that brings this line up more, which means it's not translating as far. And that's starting to feel a bit better. Let's go ahead, back this up to frame 1 and play it again. All right, I think that feels good. Let's go ahead and stop that. And now what we want to do is create our rotations. So we still have the main controller selected. We're going to be rotating on the x-axis. I'm going to hit E on the keyboard. That brings up my rotation manipulator. And we're just going to be grabbing this inside one here that's red. This will lock our rotation just on the x-axis. We have a keyframe in place already. Let's go ahead and bring it down to frame 14, which is where we have our first ball bounce, where it's striking the ground. We're going to go ahead and rotate this 180 degrees. So this way we know that it's landing on one of the controllers that allow us to do squash and stretch. I'm going to go ahead and just round this off right here. So it's negative 180 for a 180 degree rotation. It's created a keyframe for us already. We've got auto keyframing on. I'm going to hit F in the keyboard so we can see that first keyframe. Okay, if we back it up, we can see how it's rotating. So we'll continue this process for the next 2 ball bounces. The next one will be 360 degree rotation. And then the last one, we'll try a 360. If it seems like it's too much, we will back off and make that a 180 degree rotation. Okay, let's go down to our next keyframe. And on frame 38 is where we're going to have our next rotation. So we're going to rotate this 360 degrees. Let's go ahead and just round this out to negative 540 and hit enter. That's created a keyframe for us. If we back it up here, we can see the rotation happening now. Let's go to our next bounce. So on frame 57, we're going to do another rotation here. That brings us up to negative 900. Hit enter. That creates a keyframe for us. So we can now see the ball rotating in the air. And I think this last one might be a little too much. We may back off on that. Okay, let's go down to our next keyframe. So at this point, we're not really going to have much in the way of squash and stretch happening. So we're going to go ahead and just come down here to the very, very end on frame 200. And let's go ahead and add a couple more rotations in there. At this point, we don't have to be precise, but if we want to just add 3 rotations in there, that brings us up to 1980. And we can just go ahead and enter that in. So negative 1980 right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So it is spinning quite a bit here at the end, probably more than what we need. Instead of making adjustments up here in the channel box, we're going to start manipulating right down here in the graph editor by grabbing this keyframe, holding down the shift key and moving it up. So we're going to just back off on our ease out right here. I'm also going to flatten this tangent out as well. This will match the ease out that we have with the translate Z. And now we can see it rolling to a nice stop without sliding. Let's go ahead and play that. And the only thing I see here, it's both in the graph editor and when we play it back, is this rotation right here is too much, I think. So I think what we can do is back this off and just make it a 180 degree turn. So for this keyframe, we're going to change it from negative 900 to negative 720. Hit enter. That's going to correct the keyframe right there. And we'll see a more progressive transition right here on our keyframe where it's not speeding up. So we don't want to see the ball speeding up midway through. We want to see it actually begin to ease out over time. Let's go ahead and play that again. Okay, so now that we have our keyframes in for our translate Z and rotate X, we'll come back in the next lesson and begin adding in the squash and stretch.